I can handle 3 people. So
we have prepped 3 shirts.
They are $20, but whatever. They look great. Look, yeah, can you hear that? Yeah, that puts you to sleep, huh?
That's the sound of quality.
Yeah, that's the sound of quality. It's kind of like ASMR, huh? Are you hard yet? Anyway, so did I steal that joke? Yeah, I just stole it from him. Like literally 30 minutes ago. That's not the point. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about villains, talking about villainry, how to make your villains in Dungeons and Dragons as awesome as you fucking can. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. First thing, as far as beasts versus humans, do you like?
There's a lot of advantages to both.
Yeah.
The advantages to people is they can talk.
Yeah.
The only exception, and there's a few beasts that can talk, dragons, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, you have it's very few and far in between, especially ones that also instill fear as well, right? Or that aren't just like this random beast, right? Dragons, everybody knows dragons. They're familiar. You can like Smog, all those. You can kind of get into it, but I think that a lot of the times it's a little different with beasts because they don't, like you said, they can't talk, so they have a lot of disadvantages as far as like having that dialect between them to make them hated.
It's hard to stretch them past a session. Yeah. If it's a one-off, you're good to go. A one-off, a beast is fine. You can have the town is being ransacked by insert creature here, but beyond that, it's kind of hard to use them as a main villain. They're great secondaries.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think that, like I said, dragons are very as otherwise, but again, a lot of people like to fight the big beasts, right? We played with plenty of people that all they want to do.
That's their goal.
That's their goal is like, hey, so can we fight the biggest
area to figure out what you've slayed?
Exactly. Yeah. And which isn't as much. It's like I said, there's the disadvantages and advantages. The advantages is you have the advantages. They look more intimidating than humans do, right? Like they look, like gods. If you're gonna fight Godzilla or me, well, okay, I'm not very intimidating. Chuck Liddell, you're gonna fight Chuck Liddell or Godzilla. No matter how intimidating Chuck Liddell looks, Godzilla's gonna beat him.
It's a really solid tough guy from 2007.
But, no, that's a good reference. I couldn't think of any tough guys now, mostly because they're all just so soft. I don't know. Please don't kick my ass, everybody else.
But yeah, the advantage is people can talk, so you can have a more ongoing thing.
Exactly. They're a little harder to like as far as like you can go beast. How high of a CR do you go for your characters?
They're
right?
Hard to change too, because humans can level up. Well, not necessarily humans, but characters can level up with the party. So you have them start out 5 levels above or whatever, and as the party gets better, that villain gets better with them.
Yeah.
Creatures, you're a little locked in. You can always modify them, but if you're just grabbing the bestiary and flip into a creature, you're pretty locked into stats.
Yeah.
You're going to have the problem either at level 1, they're going to be impossible and decimate your party, or at late level, your party's just going to stomp on the creature and it'll be embarrassing.
Well, and then you have to come up with the reason why that monster isn't killing your character, right? Is it giving...
That's a tricky thing in all of itself.
Yeah, so, if it's a beast, why is the reason it hasn't killed you? We've done a session that was actually one of my favorite sessions of all of them was like Grendel from Beowulf. Great. Obviously it wasn't just the beast, right? The beast was honestly a very small part of it. So you have to do, and that kind of inlies like what you have to, you have to surround it with a lot of things. If you're going to have a beast as your main bad guy, like a lot of guys like to have the Tarrasque as their,
that's always the big bad because it's
the highest level.
It used to be that you flip to the end of the bestiary by CR and there it is.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have that, you have something that is super strong, super, it's unkillable, I think, right? It just kind of comes back. So, but you have to surround, if you're going to have a beast, you got to surround it with a story to make it interesting.
Some sort of situation that actually makes
Same
it matter.
with like, something we've talked about before. making goblins a good session. If you can make,
if you just use
just using goblins, right?
Just kobolds.
Yeah,
just take something that is a stereotypical boring creature and make them the whole thing.
I'm fancy as fuck. I'm fancy, okay? I'm so fancy. First things first in the rails. So what do you go a high CR? Do you have one that obviously they know kind of the level that they're going to have to beat? That's the reason why I think beasts are kind of a hard one to have your like main end all, right?
The exception, you can have a beast that has some sort of master.
Yeah.
So the beast is the physical half of the dynamic, but it has something that is in charge of it or commands it, or even if it's the servant of it that just speaks for it. Any of those things, but it needs a voice box.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of those, it's harder to do. You can do it, but I do think it is a little bit harder. So beast versus person, as far as advantages, disadvantages, I think disadvantage kind of goes to the beast because, again, the advantage is intimidation as far as looks. I think it's hard to make an intimidating guy that isn't just this guy with badass armor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or he casts some big spell. So everyone's like, oh, he must be high level.
Exactly. Where you can have a dragon and all of a sudden that is in and within itself a reason why you don't mess with it. But people, you actually have to, it's a lot more dynamic. You have to add a lot of different variants in like how you have them talk to characters, for instance, without immediately someone going, fireball, right? Like
which is the tricky situation.
Yeah,
it's double-sided too. So you got to think of, why is the villain not just attacking / killing the player?
Yeah.
If they first run into him at level 3, why is the villain not just killing the party at level 3 and just moving on? And then also, why is the party not throwing a fireball when your villain's trying to give his speech?
Exactly. Which I ran into that issue quite a bit with one of mine, where I made, when this is kind of goes along that back to the beast and has a master, right? I made one that was kind of that it was this old guy, and he used a lot of spells and other things to make chimera, like half human, half beast, and he would like send the beast to be the mad scientist type of thing, right? So you would have that, but every time he would get out, we had a character with us. It was like fireball them.
It could be a fireball. It could be a player problem too. You got to you got to take a look at that. It's either you haven't thought of a good way to you haven't given your players a reason to not attack that person yet.
Can you counter the fireball? Like if someone's
that is the other exception. You can do things like counterspell, or there's a lot of different things like a force cage where their players are locked in a box.
And I'm going to be honest. I thought, because I think a lot of these as like that you would have, that they would see it as like a movie, right? And so they would see it as something to they would want to talk to him so that they can get farther in the story because they know it goes on. But everyone's
just excited to kill.
Exactly.
And it's the whole murder hobo problem of everyone just murder is the answer to most problems in D&D, so everyone resorts to immediate murder.
Exactly. And so you have so that was a problem that I ran into. You do a very good job of you have a very good job of like masking that. You had your last one that we played was a great spellcaster, so he's able to counterspell a lot.
And that used counterspell and force cage.
Force cage.
Like we were talking about. Things just to always put some sort of barrier.
Yeah.
And I gave his reason for not trying to kill you guys was he was trying to recruit you. He saw a potential, a possible. So he had a reason of why he didn't just swat you like a fly and move along. And I think you got to answer that question beforehand, because if you bring a creature in front of your players, they will try to kill it.
Yeah.
And if you've statted it, they'll figure out a way to kill
it.
So you have to give them reasons why they wouldn't.
Exactly. And that was one thing in that campaign that I tried multiple times, like different wraparounds around that to see if, that maybe they wouldn't. And every time it did. And honestly, you ran into that at first with that campaign. We were in a library and same guy. I swear it's the same guy.
Same type of player.
Same type of player, person, but it could have been. You would have known the difference. He immediately was like, again, we're trying to get a book. We're trying to get a book inside of a place. And
in a library.
Small library.
His solution was to throw a fireball.
Yeah. So, we need a book. Yeah, no,
Well, it would burn the
are
roof. You
flammable.
could take the book in. Yeah, easy. I get it.
Yeah, no, that's no big issue.
To be fair, I didn't specify the book couldn't be burned.
Do you have to? That's the problem. That's the excuse he
You
would
could have
use?
brought a pile of ash and just said you did your best.
Hey, we got the book. It's here. It is.
Technically, it's somewhere in this ash.
Oh my gosh.
It's hard. You're always going to have the players that solve all problems with fireballs.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
That's like a meme, isn't it? Like it's like,
yeah.
I throw a fireball, and you're like, but the room was. I said I throw fireball.
Yeah, someone's trying to persuade you, and you're like, fireball.
Exactly.
I mean, it's how you solve all your problems.
So I did run into that issue where
To me, it's you either have to prevent them, so something like counterspell, or give them a really good reason not to, and that's going to depend on your players, obviously. Depending on how much your players role play and how much they don't. If they are just people who are in it for combat, great. And if they're just in it for combat, maybe go a different route. Maybe have the mad scientist is sending the monsters from afar.
Yeah.
And you just know he's behind it, but he's never having much face time in front of the players.
Yeah, and when that was the problem.
That way, every time they're faced with a monster that they can throw a fireball at and kill and feel real good about themselves, and they go home with this dead beast, and you can still have your villain that's behind the curtain pulling the strings.
Yeah,
it is hard to illustrate that he is behind the curtain.
And that's what I kind of did was the only problem is I didn't get that talking time, right? That development of character, which is
hard because the movie would cut to the villain, and you can't exactly be like, all right, while you guys are asleep, this happened. You can't do that. So you do have to have things happen in front of the players, and that's challenging.
It is challenging. So that was one thing. But another way you could do that is having your villain make like a personal connection with the characters, right? Or again, give them multiple reasons. You can kind of bring in your having multiple reasons why your character can't kill that one. We had that party that
party.
Yeah, that
Which
party.
one?
You know, the one with the dinner party. So we had an assassins campaign.
Yeah.
All we did was assassinate people. It was one of my favorite. It was great. That's
very Assassin's Creed kind of concept. Yeah.
A lot of planning. And you had this party that we went to there was multiple things. One, we were in a big city where there was multiple guards, and we kind of set up that if you keep fighting them, obviously there's enough of them, they will kill
the villain. And
I don't know what the fuck that was. Okay. The other thing,
but to give him stacked reasons of why not to, where it's, there's guards in the room. Oh, you probably can't take him in a fight anyway. He wants to kill you as much as you want to kill him. There's all these dinner guests. You can't there's plenty of reasons why it's a terrible idea to try and cut this guy's head off in the middle of a party.
Exactly. And that was a good way for us to have this good enough that we are face to face with the villain. I mean,
but all you can do is shake his hand.
All we can do is shake his hand. And that was a really cool way of doing it. And I think you do a really good job of that. I'm not as good. I usually try to set up ways that they can't kill him, and I can kind of just bat down their attacks while I keep.
Yeah, I think the holy grail is if you can trick them into not wanting to.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the best. It's good to prevent, but it's even better if you can make it where they don't even try.
Where again, in that last one, you had a character that was kind of like persuading us because he saw, he's
trying to recruit.
He's trying to recruit you. So he would come up and we're like, "Hey, everybody, hold on, wait a minute, let him talk." Hey.
Well, especially
don't throw fireball.
You were playing a character that was kind of open to the recruitment, not all the way. I mean, he never did join the evil.
Yeah, I thought about it, but no, I never did.
But he had enough of wait, let's hear what this guy is doing. Let's not just throw a fireball at him.
Exactly, and that was a.
And then again, that comes down to players. When you have a good player that does want to hear out the villain, and there are times where you should throw a fireball at the villain. I'm not trying to demonize fireball. Fireball's great. It's a ton of fun, but you don't want to have that be your only way to solve a problem.
Yeah. Kind of going on that as far as characters, I think a lot of people watch Critical Role and immediately go, "Oh, they have so much fun," and you have to also realize that they're improv actors and their whole mindset is to make this a great thing for everybody.
They're stellar at what they do. Yeah. They're all voice actors that are super talented, but I've never seen a D&D group that plays the same way as theirs.
Yeah.
So when people think that that's kind of the law, they fall into, lot of people call it the Matt Mercer problem or the Critical Role problem, where they're wondering why their group doesn't feel like Critical Role.
Yeah.
And it's because it's very different.
Well, and I think if you go into the mindset of being an improv actor and making this this session work,
yeah,
it's a lot different, because a lot of guys go in and they, like you said, they're murder hobos. They're like,
yeah,
what's that? I fucking kill it. That I fucking kill it.
Which kind of gets to a bigger problem of making sure your whole group is all on the same page.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing with Critical Role. It's 7 people in the DM. They are all on the same idea of role play as the main focus.
Yeah.
They're basically an improv class. So they're all improving off of each other, and it's great. But if one of them was a murder hobo, fireball throwing, all you need is kill, it would just, the whole dynamic would fall apart.
Exactly. So having that, and again, you're probably going to run into that just because obviously it's so common that most people, I mean, it's memes, everybody talking about that because it's hard to just get, X amount of people to hang out every week. But I think if you get in the same mindset, I think it
helps to just get everyone on the same page.
Yeah.
Of, are we going role play heavy? Are we going combat heavy, story heavy? Some combination thereof.
So I mean, again, it all depends on your players, what kind of villain you're going to make, because that depends on, how you're going to make a personal connection. And then something we usually do, we usually have a DM and a co-DM. And usually that co-DM does like a minor villain, right? Which can kind of entice a certain character to, maybe want to talk to him, or he has like a different connection with him that maybe you
have villains that are based on people's backstories that are specific to them. So a character's brother, or the person that trained them, or whatever.
Exactly.
All of those kind of specific things. You just want to be careful they don't overshadow the main villain.
Yeah.
Because the main villain has to stay the main villain.
Yeah.
Depending on how involved you want them to be too. It also depends on, is the main villain, are they the goal? Is the whole point to kill them, to stop them? Are they just an obstacle? Are they in the way of what you're actually trying to do? Or are they more of a rival? They're trying to do it before you are, and it's just a race.
Which that was that in that one that we were talking about, where it's the old guy and he's like making chimera and all that stuff. That's what he kind of was. Mad scientist,
very much a rival.
Yeah, he was a rival.
He was trying to get to the same ends we were, just before us.
Yeah. Well, and this is actually a good way that I was able to get around it, because I'm very simple-minded, right? I'm not as smart or like. I don't even want to say manipulative, but like better at it manipulating players. So manipulate, it doesn't matter. So I made one that was based on what I call the game master, right? So this is actually a good way if your characters like to fight big beasts. This was kind of like my way around that, because we had characters that always want to be like, well, I want to fight a dragon.
It's able to create them in like a hypothetical situation. So it's a very like illusion-based character.
So I made him kind of like a deity, and his whole thing was games, right? So all he did was play games. So I would do like, over here I have some of the Jenga, and they would all have a different piece. So you would pick a piece, and they would have a number on it, and that would tell what kind of
all the characters are kind of pulled into an illusion,
yeah,
and they play some sort of game with this deity who just kind of likes to have fun.
Exactly.
And that character was not the villain. The villain was the rival.
The rival, yeah.
In these games, the game master himself was more this, ambiguous deity that was on either side.
Well, and he would kind of push it. So the whole point was, this game master said, if you keep going to these areas and playing my games, eventually you'd get your wish granted. So he had like several groups going after this because they want to get this one wish grant. Everybody'd get their wish granted.
It's very Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, very Wizard of Oz, which actually
everyone is trying to get to the goal to get their wish granted. And that's why the rival is heading in the same direction.
Exactly. So you had this rival that you didn't like, and you're constantly trying to beat him. He's getting ways of like trying to beat you. And it was a really good way of, again, getting it where you can put a character in there, but it wasn't like I said, your last one, his the main villain I remember was Grevin, and he was very much able to talk with us and have these really long conversations, and it was awesome. When I even did our last one, I would very much have to flex my nuts every time I made a paladin because I wanted him to be able to pass saves, because one thing that's a problem is people with magic, they're immediately going to throw, if they don't throw a fireball, they're going to throw something else, right? That's like, oh, I try to make him stupid or whatever. And so I was like, okay, well, I got to like manipulate a lot of these ways because I can't, get my characters to actually focus on one thing. So that was a part of it. But again, going back to kind of like, if you don't want him to overshadow, so having it where this guy hates your one villain, but not your other is another problem in and within itself, because again, you don't want to overshadow, but at the same time, like we had one.
Hold your thought for a second, because I got a noob question here.
Go for it. Are villains like part of the storytellers all the time, or can you be a villain as like one of the characters, or do your characters like the ones playing, not DMing? Do you always have to be like a hero or a good guy, or can you, as in the group of people, can you be the villain? So we've actually
done a couple
evil campaigns. Our assassin campaign was an evil campaign.
That was like a borderline evil one. I mean, that one, the good guys were evil and the bad guys were evil.
Yeah, that's true. So it was both people were bad, right?
Both sides were murderers. So I mean, it was not.
We made one that was our villain campaign, right? And it was amazing. I played an anti-paladin. He played a goblin that used bombs. It was awesome.
Those are hard to make last longer. It's kind of the same reason they don't make movies where the main character, well, they do, but they make less movies where the main character is the villain, where he's bad. You can do it.
In a general session, though, you wouldn't have like, so one of you two are DMing, and then you have your group of 6 or however many players.
Yeah.
And everybody's typically good. You wouldn't have a villain amongst them typically, right?
Typically,
no.
It could be cool to do, though.
Yeah.
It likely wouldn't last beyond a session, but if you wanted to have a really cool one-off session, you could have one of the players in on it. They're the villain, and none of the other players know. And that would be really great.
Well, and so we've actually done DM where, again, I play when he DMs. So I'll be the main DM, and every once in a while when he co-DMs, I'll play a player. I've had that player, his whole goal, I mean, not his whole goal, right? I knew his end story because I'm running the whole campaign
that was
for the main story. Does that make sense? Anyway, so when he's running his stuff, I know my character at the end is going to betray the rest of the party.
You know, right? Yeah, you know where. That's what I mean, is having one player that's kind of in on it.
Yeah,
so they know where things are going and can.
Did you say exactly portray the rest of the party or betray the rest of the party?
Betray.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. You said portray, and that's like
no, I said betray. You just can't hear. So when you betray, so mine was to betray.
So you're portraying a character that will betray the
rest of the party.
So okay, yeah, I got you.
You got me now? Okay.
We made it full circle.
Yeah, catch up. So that there is that, right? You have this character that I knew that was going to betray the rest of the party. And so, I mean, he's not really a villain because, again, he did nice things and he was with the party, but eventually I knew he was going to betray the rest.
I would say that's a villain.
It is a villain. Yeah,
it is a villain.
It's a fairly rare scenario, but it is interesting. And you can do a lot of cool stuff with it.
I think that would be pretty fun if you had someone like sneaky in the crowd there. But like you said, once that person's revealed, then what would you do with them?
They're killing the party or the party's killing them.
Exactly.
It's over rather quickly. And you could do a really fun, like Among Us style session. It just likely wouldn't go past the session.
Exactly. That's really where it comes down. We had a lot of times. I
want to do an Among Us session.
No. Where'd my camera go?
You dying?
You're disappeared. Now I'm the main attraction. Woo!
All right, you make yourself big.
I don't think I have that control. Jay's got that control.
Sometimes cameras are the villain.
Now you're back.
Did it come back?
Yeah, we're good.
Look, people, shit doesn't work all the time. Sometimes we have a green screen. Sometimes our camera don't work. That's on us. Okay.
In progress.
Yeah.
Look, not everything can work all the time. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a very different problem between. You want to go fix that while I talk?
Yes.
There's a very different problem between one-off villains and campaign villains. One-off villain, you got a lot more versatility as far as you can make it a non-speaking beast or a member of the party or all of these things. Campaign, you got to figure out how they can you can't just save them for the last session when it's a year-long campaign. They're not really going to care about the main villain if they don't see them that whole time. So you have to give reasons why they can't. I think you're just out of battery, Jer.
Yeah, me too. Keep going. Just keep talking because people can hear you.
Audio's still good?
Yeah, the audio's still good.
We just switch to the laptop cam?
Oh yeah, we could actually switch that. That's fine. Here, you just keep talking. Just talk.
He actually has a little webcam there if he wants to plug that bad boy in. I know that functions well.
Oh, that too.
Yeah, you could let him know that.
Jerry, you got a
he
webcam.
can't hear me.
I know. I was hoping to just plug in the camera.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. This is only 1080p.
Technical difficulties. There's got to be that we have like some background music you can play. Oh, where's his hit his little button that gives the womp womp?
It's the wrong button, but it's fitting.
No, the other one. Hit the other one.
Hold on, you settle down, baby birds. I'll get you.
That look good.
Boom.
Hey.
It's closer. Same thing. We're good.
Okay.
There we go. All right.
First quality, I'll just have to buy a 6-foot cord. We're gonna do that right now on Amazon. No, we'll do it right now. So what were we just talking about before it was so
Villains.
rudely? Yes, but we're part of villains. So
I was talking about the difference between a one-off and a campaign.
Yeah.
There's very different obstacles. A one-off, you don't have to worry about the why don't you kill problem because you can just have them run into them once. You can have it be a beast because it doesn't matter if they can't talk. They're just a big beast causing a problem. Campaigns, you have a much bigger challenge on your hands because you want the villain to matter. And granted, you don't have to have a main villain. We mentioned Critical Role. They often don't have an overarching. It's kind of a meandering story when it comes to Critical Role. They go on for years, these long campaigns. And they'll have villains that kind of arch over several sessions, and then they die out, and then there's another one, or there's a gap of nothing. You can do that as well. You don't need a main villain. I really appreciate main villains because they give it a real clear focus and a nice beginning, middle, end. It's a nice, like, okay.
It's more like a movie.
Exactly. And I like having that nice arc of here's the problem got worse, we solved the problem.
I think a lot of people, when they talk about like there's the two different type of campaigning where they're like, okay, you either put people on a railroad as far as like you're directed in this position, this is what you're going to do, or you're sandboxing is what they call it.
And you can make that a whole conversation in of itself, but I agree, the
sandboxing,
the balancing act of that.
Sandboxing, you really have to be good at like enticing characters with a villain, even if it's only over a couple of.
So for the uninitiated, sandbox would mean you can kind of do whatever you want. You put players into town and say, what are you guys doing? And they can go rob the bar, they can go buy armor, they can go find a cave, they can do whatever they want. You just completely put the world in front of them and say, what are you guys doing? Railroad is where it's a very inline story where you kind of say, here's the quest of the night. And if they don't want to do it, you're like, oh, why are we playing? Like, it's just a very, hey, you're heading to this, you're doing this for this, problem solved. You kind of want to balance those. Too heavy either way, players tend to reject it, myself included. Where if you're complete sandbox, it sounds fun at first. A lot of people think sandbox sounds like the more enticing. So you can do whatever you want. It's creative. But it usually means the DM is prepped nothing. So there's kind of this nothing world in front of you. It's like, what do you want to do? And you're like, I don't know. What can I do? Like, is there a place to go?
When we had the guy,
a different DM
who did that, every time I would play, I'm like, why am I here?
He was very sandbox, and it felt like there was no point.
So
he would say, what do you guys want to do? And you're like, what are our options?
Exactly.
You're kind of deer in headlights of like, is there a thing for us to do? It feels like a video game that has no rules, but also has no content.
Exactly.
And you kind of want to balance that of like, if it's too railroaded, everyone just feels like, hey, why don't you just tell me what happens?
Exactly.
Clearly I have no choice. So, you can just read us a story.
Well, we actually kind of dealt with that with a different DM Of he would just be like, "You're doing this," and you're like, "But why would we do that?" You know what I mean?
Really, really unmotivated choices. where
Exactly.
You're just told, hey, you guys have been, hired to do this. You're like, yeah, but I want to do that. It sounds dumb.
Yeah. Well, and then when we're like, "Oh, we're not going to," he's like, "Well, then he meets you," because like instead of his workaround was like, "He meets you in the bedroom," and we're like, "What?
That's
What
like
a pervert!"
You want to look at things from how I like to do it. It's not the only way. There's a ton of ways, but to me,
No, there's only one.
To me, I like to think of it as how can I trick the players. It's the sociopathic strategy.
Yeah.
But I think of how can I trick the players into choosing what I want them to do rather than how can I force them to do it. If I want them to go investigate this cave, I'm like, how do I motivate them to do that on their own?
Yeah.
Not how do I tell them, hey, tonight we're going to a cave, or hey, what do you want to do with anything, and hope they choose the cave.
But you're really good at that. We've done plenty of missions, especially in that Grevin thing where we do it, and then you're like, dude, you just gave the bad guy like all this power, and we're like, wait, what?
Because you constantly have to think, several steps ahead of your players and think of how, if I want them to give this to this person, how do I make them want to do that?
Yeah.
Not how do I force them. It's just how do I make them think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that's a really
good
way
a
to
good job.
It's a good way to go about things because if you can trick your players, it becomes way easier where it feels like sandbox, but it is railroad.
Yeah.
And it finds that balance on its own because they feel like they have all this choice, but they're doing everything you want them to do.
Yeah. I usually try, because again, I'm not as good at the manipulation thing as you are. So a lot of times what I do is I try to just plan 2 sessions. And I'm like, well, they got to choose one of these 2 because otherwise we're just going to sit in a bar, which I'm cool with.
That's another good strategy, though, where you have hey, do you want to go clear this cave out, or there's this tower over here? And you've planned both.
Yeah.
And if they don't do one, you can kind of reuse that content
Exactly.
something later. But you do have both ready to go. So that's really fun as a player because then you get choices that matter, but you do still have content. You can pick a place and, there's a map, there's creatures, there's stuff. It's not I pick the tower and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, exactly.
Session's over then.
Okay,
yeah,
well, I guess we're doing nothing. Like I said, there's been some that have been close, and I'm like, oh, we're just going to jack off in the middle of a bar. But there has been some, like I said, I usually plan both, and then I usually have if you do one, there is repercussions for not doing the other first, right? And same and vice versa, right? So if there's hey, this princess is in a tower, or people are getting killed by goblins. Well, if you go save the princess, then obviously more people are going to die from the goblins. I mean, obviously there's not always a negative. This is just an example, right? But if you go kill the goblins, well, now this princess is dead because she was kept there and she was, you know what I mean? Like, not a negative. I don't think you should always have a negative because then people are like, well, then fuck, I could do a negative.
You don't only want negative motivation.
But
sometimes there's treasure there. You
exactly.
can have positive motivation.
But having repercussions of things that happen in the world because you made a decision.
Repercussions is the right word. Yeah. Repercussions for decisions. So if they make the right choice, they're rewarded for it. If they make the wrong one, they're hurt for
exactly.
it. And maybe that affects them, maybe it affects the town, maybe it affects NPCs they care about. And that's I think that, again, to go on the sociopathic route, find the things they care about and threaten them. So if they care about an NPC, that NPC is
not to too big of a level. Again, we actually had, we had a DM who immediately just kidnapped one of your NPCs and was like, we better go save her, otherwise she's going to die. And we're all like, what? No.
Yeah, you want to be careful that you're not destroying other people's stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not ruining someone's story by threatening things. So you want to be careful of, it's got to feel like natural motivation. It can't be super abrupt and weird and how did they steal them in the first place? How did this happen? It's got to make sense first.
Yeah. Well, especially I think at the time, the character that they stole was probably just as good as us.
It didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense.
And I think that's a big part. Going back to villains, I think villains are an easy way to motivate. Because if you can make them hate the villain, the villain, it's the easiest motivator in the world. You can literally just say, oh, he's been spotted there.
Yeah.
And those players are on their way.
Yeah, exactly.
A villain, when you properly make them either hate the villain or, again, if it's like a rival and they want to beat them to the place or be better, all you got to say is they're there. Well, and the players are.
I mean, not even that. It could be like, oh, the villain. So, in your Grevin thing, the main villain's Grevin. You could have a villain going, I don't know, this guy was there. His name was Kevin or something that rhymed with that, and we're like, that's probably grabbing
And
everybody's line up.
Those players will kill Kevin.
Exactly. Are you Grevin? No, kill him.
Yeah, that's a good villain. It's not only a good story thing; it can tie a story together really well. But it's an ultimate motivator, which makes it a good DM tool to use.
Yeah,
You can really tie a story together with a target, or with a rival that they want to beat, or something where they just immediately hate that guy, and they have to, it gives them something to point their fireballs at.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have that. That's another one really is like, are they alone, right? Do they have people surrounding them that are miniature bosses that can lead up to a main villain, right? That way you give your characters like a plus to killing somebody, to killing one of the main bad, but not killing the main bad.
Especially because that can be the problem with one villain, is it's very unsatisfying if you keep running, as a player, if you keep running into the main villain and you can't kill him, obviously, because you don't want the campaign to end on session 3 if you're trying to make it last, 9 months. So you don't want to constantly blue ball your players, though. If they keep running into the villain and they can't,
can't finish them.
Yeah, they can't get that big finish. They're eventually going to start to lose motivation because they run into them, and if they know, okay, the campaign's going to go around roughly till level 15.
Yeah,
and they run into the villain at level 7, they're like, oh, we just sit down, we know nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to give no stakes to the run-in.
Yeah.
So it helps to have minor villains where it's like, okay, the main villain has these 2 companions, and they can slowly throughout, at level 7 at one of the run-ins, they got to kill one of the campaign. And then you don't know if it's going to go that way. You got to leave it somewhat up to chance, again, based on their decisions.
Exactly.
But if they get a good play where they run into one of the rivals, one of the lower villains, and they're able to kill him, your whole party is going to feel really good about that, and it's going to just reinvigorate them to go after that main villain.
Exactly. Well, and it was kind of along that, though, is like variety is key, right? So if you're going to make 3 different villains for this campaign, or 8 or whatever, in your next one, you got to make them different.
Don't do repeats, especially
don't do
back to back.
Especially back, because you don't want it to be like, oh, well, this is the same kind of thing, and kind of.
If the main villain of one campaign is a demon, don't do a demon again.
Exactly.
Do anything else.
Anything else. That's something that I really, like I said, on our last one, again, Grevin was a sorcerer. I chose a paladin to try to kind of offset that. Their goals were completely different. One was immortality. One was like
conquest. I mean, they were very different achievements.
I know that's actually another way that so in this one, and with the one with my paladin, the paladin only makes it up to a certain level, and then you go into hell, and you then face different bosses, and the final boss. You know what I mean? Like,
said it so casually. You go into hell.
As you do.
Very Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, Dante's Inferno. You go into hell.
Which is your favorite, right?
Well, you guys never been?
You
guys should try DMT. This guy named Joe Rogan told me about DMT and how everybody should do it. Meet Satan. So maybe I would love to do it.
DMT.
I would love to I want to do DMT, but I want to record it to see how I act.
Oh, God.
Why not? Yeah, hold on. Let me write this down. DMT. Do it.
On cam.
On cam. Let's do that one before 2 guys and 1 cup. So those are the ones I think we should do.
I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I think about the 2 dudes and 1 cup. Oh no, a DMT. Got it. So yeah, anyway. That is
But villains, I think the right way to look at them is not just they become a multi-purpose tool. Multi-purpose thing. They're a good story structure. They're a good tool for the DM to motivate players with. They're a good thing for players to feel rewarded. When they kill the villain, it's this nice cathartic. That's when you know you won the campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice when you like return the item you were supposed to bring back or something. But it doesn't compare to when you slay the beast, when you kill the dragon, when you cut the head off of the villain, when you finally get that spell off on the main villain and you've defeated them. It's a satisfaction that I think a lot of other things in D&D can't match. There's a lot of satisfaction. The classic is treasure. run through a dungeon, get the gold, very Diablo-esque. And I love that too.
Yeah.
It's right up my alley, but it's a lot more quick fun. It doesn't have that same satisfaction as when you kill the main villain.
Yeah.
Or even the more minor ones, if they have, lesser lieutenants and you defeat them, it is a very satisfying feeling. So it's a good thing to tie a whole campaign together. I think it's very hard to run a campaign without some sort of villain. You can have it where it is some sort of challenge, a more person versus environment or whatever, but I don't think it's going to feel like the same nice cohesive campaign.
This may be the inner nerd in me, but yes, blue balling a villain to finish. Yeah, that's what we do, cringy. But that is one thing that that I think that like you were talking about, treasure versus villains. This may be the inner nerd in me. I've had the hairs on the back of my neck stand up from killing a villain. That's like we're just like. Yes, we're treasure. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Even when you get close but don't.
Yeah.
When you almost got it, but then they teleport away.
Still one of my favorite moments in D&D. So one thing that we use in our D&D games, I don't know if everybody uses, is what's going on with that, but, get on our level, is we use cards for 20s and 1s, right? So when you roll a natural 20.
Yeah, they're fairly common, like critical hit, critical miss. So if you roll a 20 or a 1, they're not always, they're optional, but they're fun.
They are a lot of fun because they
add a little spice.
They add a little spice. And we had one where we're fighting this guy and somebody else rolls a natural 20 and cuts off the leg that I'm holding on to. And then I grab it as a monk and I kill the guy with his own leg.
He had the tavern brawler feat, so he's proficient with improvised weapons. So he was able to use the leg to beat the man to death with his own leg.
It was so Mortal Kombat.
It was it was Quan Chi, Mortal Kombat 4.
Yeah, exactly.
It was his fatality.
Fatality.
Not to go super deep cut nerd, but yes, it was very Quan Chi, very cool. And that moment will always, it's not just when you guys killed that villain, who was a villain from the beginning, but it wasn't just that. It was you killed him with such style.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was such that's like your character's definitive moment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and even when we killed the main villain in that, it was a spell that ended up getting him. And I remember the girl who casted the spell looked at us with some of the most joy I've ever seen a human being.
She had tears.
Yeah.
Real tears. I made a player cry.
It was such a weird thing that you're sitting there going like, and you were just as excited. But now looking back on it, I'm like, she probably wouldn't make that face if I gave her a winning lottery ticket.
If she had opened,
you know what I mean? She'd be like, "Oh my god!" But it was such a oh my god, I just got him. Because you also a big thing is you spend such a long time building up to it. That campaign was what, a year long?
It went about a year, and that campaign you guys did get fairly blue balled of running into him a lot.
Yeah.
And then there was always reasons why you either didn't want to or couldn't kill him.
Yeah.
So it made sense and you didn't feel robbed by it, but it was finally like, okay, we know this is the end. The gloves are off. He's sick of you. You're sick of him. There's no more reason to hold back on either end. This is where it ends. It was very clear. So when she was able to get that spell, I can't remember what it's called. It's like stone form. He turned into stone.
He turned into stone.
I can't think of the name of the spell off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Is blue balling an actual term?
No. It wasn't that one.
She made him stupid. I can't remember what it is, but it turns his intelligence like a 3. And then when he's dumb, people went up and turned him to stone. But it was he'd been counterspelling the whole combat and really trying to put things off. And I kind of started shifting gears from defense to offense. And so I didn't counterspell one spell, rolled a 4, and that was what ousted it. And that was when she turned back to the party with tears in her eyes.
Yeah, well, and like I said, it was one of those things that it was because that's what it was. And then we turned him to stone so that he wouldn't.
Wow, yeah, because it was a temporary spell, but it was enough to be able to walk up and get whatever you want. He couldn't save.
We hated him so much.
Which gave you the perfect trophy, too. And this was just a great perchance. But then you have him as a statue.
Yeah, which is so cool. I did enjoy that because then we had him in our trophy room. It was the actual villain, not obviously we didn't.
It's
pay
a
money.
statue of him, but
Exactly.
he literally is the person
Exactly.
as well.
I want to say we did take out the back of his head, like the whole.
You guys drilled a hole in it to make sure no one could fix it.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't so that we could make love to the back of his head. So,
like you do.
Anyway,
that's true victory,
right? But, I mean, really, how much fun do you want to have? So that was a really good ending to a villain. Like I said, you do get that like hair stuff.
There's no satisfaction like defeating a villain, or even when the villain gets away. There's no bigger motivation than like next time I see him.
God!
Yeah, and that's like, as you think of any good story, they almost always have a villain. There's exceptions. Don't get me wrong. You can also have things like Moby Dick, his white whale. You can have this like unachievable goal. That's a good way to go as well. But to me, the easiest way to motivate players, get everyone in the same direction, give a lot of satisfaction, villains. Have a good villain. Really put a lot of work into your villain.
The only thing that I would say that is a little bit different is that I've run into was, so again, we had that hell campaign, and at the very end we had
the devil.
The devil. You go to fight the devil.
But you have the option.
You have the option to fight the devil.
You fight your way through. It's very Dante's Inferno. The only way out is to go deeper.
Yeah.
As you get down, you fight through the levels. Very fun, and each level has its own personality, its own run-ins. It's a really great idea. And then when you get to the end, there's an out. You can get out, or you can go face the devil himself. It's pretty implied that it's
yeah, but that's the thing. I think a lot of players think that, if I fight the main villain at the end, I will win.
And that one was fairly implied that it was an unwinnable fight. It was basically, if you thought your character, you were the DM in that, and I was one of the players, and I chose to go face the devil, but I had no expectation of victory. In fact, I was certain that I wasn't going to. But I had that my character had kind of done everything he wanted to do, and he didn't want to feel like he was copping out or leaving. He wanted to go face it all the way through. It was kind of he set himself on a path that he wanted to finish. And he knew what that finish very likely was.
Yeah.
And that's how it ended.
But the other two.
So when you asked, like, do you guys want to go? One leaves. And then the three of us I said, I'm like, no, I'm going to see this through. And the other two, because I said that, were like, yeah, us too. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, you're going to die.
You're going to die though, right?
And they had very strong expectation to defeat the devil. And that does come with the whole manipulating players. You can kind of let them know. I feel like you made it more
I made it pretty clear.
I'd say you made it more than clear that, it's literally
the devil. That guy that rivaled God? Yeah, that guy.
And it wasn't like a super high level campaign, and we were high level, but nothing absurd. Nowhere near where we could defeat all of hell. Like, it would have made no sense. We'd already found like workarounds to get to where we were. Like, we were already out of our depth at that point. And it was a very clear, like, do you want to go meet your maker? I mean, obviously not later. But do you want to go face it even though you won't win? And that was the question. And I think they just kind of misunderstood the question. I was very satisfied with the ending, because to me, it was this, do you want to go face him? And I was like, absolutely. And I got wrecked. But it was the best character death I've ever had.
That was a really weird campaign for me, though, because all my characters died at the end, where I was like, okay. So at the end of the night, we go.
Yeah, all the players
died. I'm like, all right, guys. So
I was happy with it.
Thing, you were happy, and I'm sitting there going like, yeah, but you can tell the other two were like, hey, dude, what the fuck?
We got to like level 6 of hell. Those who aren't familiar with Dante's Inferno, those are the levels of hell that represent what sin you have committed in life. You go to that circle. In Dante's Inferno, the character travels his way down the levels. So that's kind of the model we were following. So we went through all the levels. We got to like level 4 or 5, and I had kind of a sector like, I don't think my character's coming out of this. I think he has his sister had died, and we found her on the level she was in.
Yeah,
and you were able to send people back or you kind of choose their fate. and he was able to send her back because she was wrongfully in hell. And then after that, he didn't really care. He was pretty disconnected with, at this point, he feels like he's kind of where he deserves, especially going through violence, that circle of hell, because it really represented his whole life. So he kind of had a concept of, that's where I belong. Yeah. And so when the option comes to face the devil, he's like, that's where I need to go. That's my ending. And I think the other players saw it as like, let's go kill the devil. And I think it just kind of comes down to, again, expectation versus what you're going to get.
Yeah,
and that one, as long as we're talking villains, the devil was not the main villain. I mean, that was the thing, is that one was not a thing dangled above us that we got, denied at the end. Yeah. The devil was always, the devil is always like an ephemeral idea. And at the end,
it's a big word.
An odd thing.
There you go. That's more me. Those
get back
odd 3-letter words.
It was an intangible. That big word.
That was bigger too. What the his
something you couldn't just kill. It's not.
There we go. I got that. Yeah.
It's more than a man, and that was the thing. Is I think the expectation to kill that was unreasonable from the get-go, and I think that's another good thing of setting player expectation is what is a reasonable, like, just get an idea of what is a reasonable expectation for them and what is a really stupid expectation for them. Yeah. So if they think they're going to slay dragons by themselves, just one guy cut the head off an ancient dragon and drag it back to town, you're like, we're just really not at that point. Yeah. And that's kind of stupid. It would make dragons really dumb. Yeah. If just like a townsman could just show up with, his short sword and behead them.
Well, then you don't get to add other characters that are that are good at you, and then you're like, well, why wouldn't anybody else do this? I do remember when you fought the devil. There was
you gotta get rid of
I remember the devil. I remember after we're looking at both people and
both as in not me, the other two.
Well, no, yeah. So I look at the other two, and they're just like, we got screwed, and you had a smile on your face, like, I took 2 hits.
That was they got. So they got killed in 1 hit, and I survived the first hit and died on the second. So I at least got 1 swing of my sword on the devil.
You did. Yep. You got to hurt him.
I drew blood.
Bit. Yep.
And that's all I cared about. I survived the 1 hit, and then he crushed my head. But that was satisfying in and of itself. Like, to be able to have gotten to that point. Not to defeat him, that's just super unreasonable. But the fact that I got to the point where I could even face him was an achievement in and of itself.
Well, and like I said, I remember that look on your face. You were pretty happy, and they were just
I was.
And you were like, dude, I hit him.
It's the best character death I've ever had. And I've had characters die. I mean, that was a big one. And it was one where we had plenty of villains before entering hell. Once you were in hell, the goal had shifted from villain defeat to escape hell. Yeah. And that's kind of what I mean by person versus environment is you can have a situation like, oh, you're in hell, how do you get out?
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't need a villain from that point. You do still have the implication of the devil. But you don't need to have it a defeatable enemy. And those are good. You can have that situation with villains too. Again, super satisfying to kill your villain. So it depends on how long you blue ball them to. If it's a couple of sessions and it's an unachievable thing, you're all good.
Terrible.
But if it's something where the whole campaign, they're just like salivating to kill this main villain, they better at least have the chance. I mean, I get if they make a dumb decision and they can't, that's on them. Yeah. But you got to at least give them the opportunity.
Yeah, you can't just keep blue balling them.
To defeat that villain. And same with rivals. You can either have it where the rival switches to a defeatable enemy. Really good example of a rival that they don't necessarily want to defeat. Here's a good nerd example.
Yeah.
Pokemon. The old Pokemon games. Professor Oak's nephew?
Gary?
Gary, yeah. But is this his nephew, right?
Yeah, this is his nephew.
In that, he comes out and he's a total shithead.
Yeah.
And, he had, what are you going to do? And he goes to fight you. If you were to just say shank Gary, he's your like Professor Oak is kind of your guy in charge, if you were to murder his nephew, you might be in trouble.
Yeah.
I would say your Pokemon training days have come to an end. I don't know if prison exists in that world, but I would assume you would find out.
Did they never show prison?
No, it's never really introduced.
They
but
should totally
you
do
would
that.
assume it exists.
Because you know people are sick.
Someone's
People make love to animals. You know people are making love to Pokemon, and I'm assuming it's illegal.
I was gonna say like Team Rocket, like some existing things, but yes.
No, yeah, Team Rocket does evil stuff too.
Pokemon bestiality, I'm sure, is a thing. And it would be punishable by prison.
You would assume.
I mean,
well, I don't know.
You
If it's your Pokemon, is it your no, you can't have sex with your own dogs, and those are property. Yeah, but you can't have sex with your dog, and that's property. Anyway, we've got off.
The real good point that I was getting to is Gary is a really good example of you can't just kill him. Yeah. When he's in your way and he's this shithead and you hate him and you do want to defeat him, but you can't just throw a fireball at his head.
Yeah.
You can't just tell your Charizard to burn him.
Yeah.
You have to defeat him, per the rules of combat because there's societal reasons why you can't. It's a really good way to make your villain unkillable by rules of the universe rather than unkillable by skill.
Yeah.
You beat Gary every time you see him, unless you suck.
The first time, I think you don't beat him, right? Don't they make him pretty hard to beat the first time you fight him?
He's just super effective against you.
Yeah. He always picks it. Yeah.
He picks whatever Pokemon is super effective against yours. But you can beat him every time. And he's still a shithead you want to beat every time. Yeah. But you never kill him. That's the thing, that's a good use of a rival style villain. You don't want to do that same strategy for where the whole point is to kill him, because then you just will.
Yeah. Like Gary.
Exactly. Gotcha. You just shank him in the alleyway and then you're like, I don't see him. But when it's a rival that you want to give them reasons why they can't, having in a similar situation where it's like, oh, he's the nephew of your mentor. If you go to your mentor and be like, oh, by the way, your nephew's a real jerk, so I slit his throat. Yeah. That might go over real poorly.
I mean, you don't know until you try, but yeah, that might go poorly.
But you can only try once.
You can only try once. That's true.
So to me, that's a good example of a rival where you can run into him a bunch of times. He's always a nuisance. He's always a really good motivator because you're like, well, I got to get there first. I got to be better. I got to defeat him, and I got to move on faster than he does. And so he's this constant motivator. But he's not the big bad problem. So you're still going for a different goal. And Gary is just always, either one step ahead or one step behind or right there in tandem with you. And you're just constantly trying to stay ahead.
Yeah. And that's, again, we've kind of talked about different ways to go about villainy.
They're both words. Villainy.
Anytime you're going for the V word, we've told you how to do it.
Bad guyness.
That's honestly, that's kind of our way to do it. Obviously, let us know on Facebook or YouTube. Comment down below. Tell us how you guys do
There are countless
things.
Other ways to do it, and I appreciate hearing other people's because I've tried a bunch, and I'd like to try more.
Yeah, so if you have a good way of doing that, please comment and let us know down below. Mac, I saw you texting me. Love you. Obviously, what do you guys? Let me know what you guys think about the shirts and stuff like
shameless
that.
Plug.
Yeah, shameless plug. Whatever. So those are great. Please, again, like, subscribe on Twitch, follow us. If your mom will let you put her credit card info, please subscribe to that too. And
ask after.
Yeah, ask after. It's always better to ask for forgiveness than for permission, right? So take your mom's credit card and start.
I think that's illegal.
Is it?
To ask.
If it's no, don't then.
We're obviously kidding.
We're obviously kidding. So we're obviously kidding. Don't do that. But seriously, it's Fortnite outfit or me making it makes me happy. So
this is like a real life skin.
Yeah, exactly. I will. Anyway, love you guys again. Comment, subscribe, and again, shameless plug. So love you guys. Bye.